If you wait for a woman to explicitly tell you she's interested, you'll miss out on every romantic opportunity of your life. But if you make a move just because she was polite, you risk destroying the relationship completely. This puts men in a brutal position. To figure out if a connection is real, you are usually forced to put your ego and your social reputation entirely on the line. Most guys deal with this by falling into one of two traps. First, there's the overthinker. If she smiles, he assumes she's deeply invested. He acts prematurely on basic friendliness and creates massive, unnecessary awkwardness. On the other end is the oblivious guy. He needs her to hold up a neon sign saying, "I like you." Because he waits for a clear verbal confession, the romantic window closes before he even realizes it was open. The way out of this trap is to stop listening for words and start looking for subconscious behavioral deviation. When a woman feels genuine attraction, she doesn't announce it. Her actions simply begin to shift away from her normal baseline friendliness. To measure those shifts, we can use a framework called the escalation matrix. We map the potential social risk of making a move against the actual probability of a real connection. If you take the oblivious route and wait for verbal confirmation, your risk is virtually zero, but your probability of actually building a romance is just as low. If you take the overthinker route and pounce on a single friendly smile, you get your answer instantly, but the risk of misreading the situation spikes off the chart. What you need is to reach the action threshold. This is the exact pocket where you have collected enough behavioral evidence to safely justify the risk of making your move. Navigating a new relationship shouldn't rely on blindly guessing the vibe. You need a systematic way to weigh risk against hard, observable data. We can break that behavioral data down into 7 specific signals. The first group belongs to Tier 1, physiological cues. These are involuntary reactions that happen well before she ever consciously decides to flirt. When a person feels drawn to you physically, it generates internal emotional tension. The body can't contain all of that energy, so it leaks out in very specific biological ways. The most common leak is prolonged eye contact. Naturally, people break a gaze after a second or two. By holding eye contact just a fraction of a second longer than socially required, she is silently testing the physical tension between you. However, this only counts as a valid data point if it noticeably breaks from her baseline. You have to compare how she looks at you against how she looks at everyone else in the room. The second leak is vocal modulation. Psychologists note that people unconsciously adjust the pitch and pacing of their voice around someone they desire. Her tone drops. The pacing slows down. That becomes noticeably softer and more emotionally engaged than her normal speaking voice. The third signal is a sudden spike in nervous energy. The internal pressure of attraction often causes a woman to play with her hair, fidget, or completely lose her train of thought. Again, contrast is everything. If someone who is normally sharp and highly confident becomes awkward and highly self-aware the minute you walk up, you are looking at a massive indicator of hidden tension. But there is a trap here. Because Tier 1 signals are entirely subconscious, they are incredibly easy to write off as a random mood swing or just a trick of the light. You need these physiological cues to confirm that basic chemistry exists. But on their own, they are far too subtle to justify gambling your social reputation. To safely escalate, you need data from the second category. These are spatial and boundary cues. Unlike physiological leaks, these are active, conscious choices she makes to test the waters of intimacy. The first is selective attention. Even in a loud, crowded group setting, a woman experiencing intense attraction will lock her focus entirely onto your reactions and remember the smallest details of your conversation. Next is playful teasing. She will craft specific, highly personal jokes or playfully challenge you, designed entirely to provoke a reaction and test your emotional composure. Do not confuse this with platonic joking. Friendly banter is comfortable and lacks stakes. Teasing driven by attraction carries a sharp, underlying tension meant to build a private emotional connection. The sixth signal is physical touch. When she finds tiny excuses to brush your arm while laughing, or accidentally on purpose bumps into you, she is deliberately collapsing the physical boundary between you. This is a critical test. If she initiates these small touches and you flinch, lean back, or ignore them, you instantly signal a lack of interest, and the escalation stops cold. The final and most powerful signal is her attempt at creating isolation. She stays behind after the group leaves. She finds a reason to walk beside you. She is actively removing the safety net of the crowd. Romantic progression requires a vacuum. True, intense attraction simply cannot fully materialize without privacy and an environment of uninterrupted focus. When you hit this stage, external distractions of the room essentially fade away. The entire social dynamic shrinks down to just the two of you. These Tier 2 signals require an active investment of social capital. By closing the distance and isolating you, she is definitively proving that she prioritizes your presence over everyone else around her. Now you have the 7 signals, but you need a strict system for deciding when to act on them. Enter the cluster rule. In social dynamics, an isolated data point is mathematically meaningless. The rule is simple. Never escalate until you observe multiple signals from the physiological and spatial tiers simultaneously. If you spot a single sign, like prolonged eye contact, your job is to exercise patience. Hold your ground and gather more data. Making a move at this stage is the exact error that ruins friendships. One polite touch or a lingering glance is far too easily explained away as basic baseline friendliness. But if her tone slows down, she starts teasing you directly, and she maneuvers to stand next to you as the group walks outside, that is a cluster. Your ROI threshold is crossed, and action is now justified. For the overthinker, committing to the cluster rule is a shield. It protects your reputation by forcing you to safely ignore those isolated, overly friendly gestures that usually trip you up. For the oblivious guy, this rule acts as a strict set of operating instructions. It demands that you actively monitor her baseline, turning a casual hangout into a sharp exercise in social observation. When you stop reacting to random noise and wait for the cluster, the true nature of the dynamic suddenly locks into place. Stop agonizing over the fact that she hasn't explicitly told you how she feels. Start mapping the consistency of her behavioral deviations. True attraction is proven in the data long before